Well, we're not far at all away from the start of college football, and this is the time of year where everyone makes their final predictions. I do want to talk about one in particular from Ralph Russo, who's covered college football for a while for the Associated Press, and he's got a very interesting pick for who's going to play for and win the national championship. But he's got some other stuff in here too, talking about who's going to overachieve and underachieve. One part here that I want to talk about is he's got the Florida Gators in an area of being ranked, but they'll finished unranked. And right now the Gators are at 13. He's also got Indiana and Louisiana Lafayette in there. I think Indiana's going to lose to Cincinnati, so I think that will hurt them as the season goes on. But Georgia, Alabama for the Gators, LSU, those are all losable games. I think Missouri is a losable game for the Gators. So there's several losable games, but that's one thing that that Russo's got in here. He's got Clemson beating North Carolina to win the ACC, Oklahoma over Texas Christian in the Big 12. He's got Wisconsin over Ohio State. I think one team people are kind of skipping over is Wisconsin because of Ohio State. In the SEC, he has Georgia over Alabama. He's going to say that, he goes on to say that the New Year's Six Bowls are going to be Ohio State and Oregon. And the Rose, the Sugar will be Alabama and Texas Christian. Fiesta would be A&M and Cincinnati. That would be an interesting game for sure. I'd be very curious to see how Cincinnati stacks up with A&M. And then Carolina and LSU in the Peach Bowl. That would be three conference teams in the Sugar Fiesta and Peach respectively. And then in the championship, the 14 playoff, he has Georgia as the 1 seed. Of course, if they're going to win, it doesn't say whether they're going to beat Clemson or not. He has Georgia as the 1 coming into the playoff against Wisconsin, who I'm assuming he's saying is going to upset Ohio State. And then that would be in the orange because that's closer to Georgia. That would be where they'd prefer to play, is in Miami. And the Cotton Bowl would be Clemson and Oklahoma, which would be, you would think, more of an Oklahoma crowd with it being played in Texas. He goes on to say that Georgia and Oklahoma will play for the national championship and that the Bulldogs will win that elusive first national championship since 1980. I will say that if it becomes Georgia and Oklahoma, that would be one of the classic matchups of college football we've not seen played very often. When you think about the blue bloods of this sport, those two are certainly among that group. And OU and Georgia's classic in the Rose Bowl was, I was on the field. It was an amazing game, just an amazing football game. That it took place at the Rose with everything basically on the line was it was hard to write a script like that. But Oklahoma has had a rough run for themselves, and then won the national championship in 2000. And then in 1985. So 2 national championships for the Sooners since Georgia last won theirs. But Oklahoma's been starving too. They lost it in 03. They lost it in 08. They have not won a college football playoff game that they would beat Clemson. Part of me wants to see that before I believe it. But Oklahoma is probably tired of the talk that they can't win in the playoff. Just, I'm sure, the same way that Georgia fans are tired that they've not won the national championship and have heard about it from teams that they have dominated lately, Auburn, Florida, etc., so Tennessee. But that would be a curious national championship game. He's not the only one picking Georgia to represent the league in the 14 playoff. Mark Schlabach had the same exact pick over at ESPN, and Mark's been doing this for at least as long as I have, longer than I have for sure. But I wonder what y'all would make of a championship game that would be Georgia and Oklahoma. But now look, it's this time of the year. We don't know anything right now. We know Georgia and Clemson have a huge game coming up in a matter of days. And we know they both certainly could win the national championship this fall. But that Oklahoma, Ohio State, Alabama, and beyond will have something to say about it. I think that there's been a lot of momentum of late to pick Georgia as a national champion. They're a 3-point underdog to Clemson to start the season. So if you don't win that game, it becomes harder to believe that Georgia wins the national championship. But in talking with a lot of the people that I have lately, I've talked to a lot of people in this August about Georgia and where they position themselves. The reality is, if you're not winning the conference championship, it's going to be really hard to make the claim that you should be in the playoff. We've only seen one team not win the SEC championship and go to the playoff, and that was Alabama. And I think we know that they often get the benefit of the doubt that other teams just don't. So that was the 2017 team that beat Georgia in the national championship game. But Ralph Russo's been around for a while. I think Georgia fans obviously would love to win the national championship no matter what happens to the Gators. But here's what he said there. The Gators lost a lot of firepower and need a big step forward from a defense that was a mess last year. Oh, look, Alabama's on the schedule too. It is going to be challenging for Florida for sure. Here's what he had to say about Georgia's presumed SEC championship game against the Tide. Georgia over Alabama, he writes. JT Daniels gives the Bulldogs the type of dynamic offense they need to break through against the Crimson Tide after 3 crushing losses in the last 4 seasons. Do you realize that Georgia and Alabama would have only played twice in the last 12 years had it not been for these championship games in 12, 17, 18? I mean, that's the one thing about expansion. I'm no big fan of what's happened in the SEC so far with 14 teams because you're getting Missouri, which is a disaster. It means you're not playing LSU. You're not playing Alabama. Georgia played Ole Miss for decades, and this killed that off for good. But it does mean for a powerful league. In the near future, we'll see what happens. But I did want to know what y'all thought about Ralph Russo. This is his Associated Press's college football lead writer and has been so for some time. And you do feel a lot of momentum towards Georgia. They're just going to have to go out and win the games, though. It's easy to say someone's going to win the national championship. I would not pick Georgia because I'm not comfortable, frankly, picking anyone right now. I think all these the 5 teams that everyone is talking about, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and OU, all have issues. I don't know if they all have terminal issues, but they all have problems. Alabama is replacing a lot of firepower. They did that from 19 into 20. Wasn't a problem for them then. So can they do that twice? I don't know. Georgia, right now their biggest problem is injuries. I think they are going to be a very different team in November or even October than they are at the beginning of the season just because of the amount of people that are out. But even for them, they got to do it. They got to prove that they can do it. Oklahoma, Ohio State are in the same boat as Georgia. They've not won the national championship with their current head coach and the current system. So until they do it, people are going to be skeptical. But Ohio State, for sure, losing a quarter. All these teams lost their starting quarterback coming into the year except Georgia. Clemson, for Clemson and Georgia both, the loser of that game, there's going to be some doubts. There's going to be a lot of negativity. But, for Clemson, the path is easier than almost anyone on the list, maybe with the exception of Oklahoma. There's just not a lot in Clemson's way, but they lost some serious firepower. It wasn't just Trevor and Travis Etienne, lost some wide receivers. There are some doubts about the secondary and linebackers at Clemson, particularly the secondary, losing DeAndre Kendrick. So there are some issues that everyone has, and everyone's got to figure it out. How good is your place kicker? Can your punter get you out of a jam? These are things we don't talk about at all that really are important at the end of the day. If you didn't have Jackpot last year, Georgia loses to Cincinnati. What do you think about that? Let's talk about it more over on Dog Post. We'll see you on the website.